Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
It looks like we've got one more minute. Do we have everybody we need? Think so. Okay, then for the record, I'll introduce myself. I'm Commissioner Fowler, and we've got just a very short agenda today. So I will let Karen Parkman start with roll call.
Okay, roll call for today. For the record, my name is Karen Parkman. I'm the program coordinator for the Oregon Racing Commission, and Chair Fowler.
Yes.
Commissioner Stein.
I'm here.
Director Nguyen.
Here.
And presiding steward Mike Twiggs.
Here.
Wonderful. Then I guess we've got everybody, and we have no old business to discuss. So I will hand it over to Director Nguyen for the new business.
Great. So we have one agenda item for consideration, and this agenda item is to limit the number of days that someone can, that a horse can race. The way that we have this set up is that a horse cannot race less than 3 days. They would have to have 3 days between a race, and they could not race more than to have 2 races, and they cannot race more than 3 times in a 10-day period. So that's our recommendation for this, based on the safety of the horses, and I would love to hear what you two think, and then I recommend that you open it up to public comment.
I think it's a good idea. I don't have any larger thoughts other than I do think that that's a very good idea. I'll ask Commissioner Stein if he's got opinions about this.
Yeah, I do. In looking, I'm just going now from the proposed schedule we have for the fairs this summer. I don't see issues with any of the restrictions that have been suggested. I can't imagine a horse racing more than one time at Union. And after Union, you have Grants Pass, which basically is, I'll use the term weekend. I know they're not technically the weekend, but basically could race potentially once a week. After Grants Pass and you go to Prineville, since you have basically a gap, again, at 3 days, Crook, at Prineville, I see possibly racing the 9th back the 12th. I don't see that as an issue we're talking, 3 days. Then you have a break, then you have Tillamook, and again, potentially a horse could race August 6th back the 9th. But beyond that, I don't see, an issue for the horses. But in general, though, my concern is, my experience as a veterinarian is that when there's no time for a horse to recover, not just recover, but also to evaluate the horse after a race. Most horses are given full rest the day after they race. Some get 2 full days rest after they race. I don't see a way to evaluate that horse from a trainer's perspective, whether they are potentially, on the verge of either a catastrophic breakdown or not. And that's obviously our concern, that over racing a horse can lead to these catastrophic breakdowns, as there is certainly anecdotal evidence this occurs, and I think there is also statistical evidence that that occurs, that the more times a horse races in a short period of time, the greater likelihood they would suffer a breakdown.
Director Nguyen, do you have comments before I open it to public comment?
I have no comment. I am not a veterinarian. It sounds like it makes sense to me, but that's not my background.
Understood. I'm in the same boat. So I will open it up to public comment then at this time.
Did I say?
Looks like Mr. Bowden, go ahead. And then I see your hand up too, Mr. Lowe.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, on the surface, I don't have a big problem with this. Traditionally at the Prineville, at the Crooked River Roundup, and at Tillamook, it's not unusual for a horse to run twice in those 4 days. So we want to be a little cautious. I mean, when you're dealing with a limited horse population at the fairs, we don't want to discourage anybody from showing up, because quite frankly, some people will look at it like, if I can't run a horse twice, and it's not going to be every horse. Commissioner Stein's absolutely right. You evaluate the horse, and some horses are just, they're going to run once and they're not going to run twice because they're not going to be ready. You do have some horses that can run twice in the 4 days, and we want to keep the fairs viable in terms of attendance from the horsemen. So, I mean, especially when you're, with the price of hay and fuel and everything else being what it is right now, it's got to make economic sense too. So, but obviously the horsemen are going to stand right at the front and say what's best for the horse always comes first. So.
And I saw your hand up, Rod.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat with Randy. I just want to protect the fairs, hoping that there's enough horses that they can race and we don't have, we're going to have to cancel races because of that. I just don't know if I'm not worried about Grants Pass because our days are spread out, so it's not an issue for us that I see, but I do see it an issue for some of the other fairs. I would have liked to see this 2 days rather than 3 days. That would give, like Prineville and Tillamook, the option to run a horse twice in those short periods of time. I don't agree running back to back day after day, which I have seen that happen at some of these fair meets. So I understand the concern. But I also know that we're doing a lot of other things to protect these horses with vet checks ahead of time and all of those types of things that's watching for any issues that we might have. And I don't know if there's been any research on this with the fairs to really know that we have a problem, because I'm not sure that we do, but I don't know if there's been research and looking at our fairs and saying, hey, this horse ran 3 times and it broke down on the 4th day. I don't know if anything's been really done with that. So I don't know where this came from exactly, but
This is Dr. Lombard. I do have a comment.
We have no trials at Prineville.
okay.
Were you finished, Rod?
Yeah, I'll be done. Sure.
Okay. And I see a number of other hands, so I'm going to try to make sure I get to everybody. I saw Linnell's hand up next, and Dr. Lombard, I will come to you next after that.
Hi, this is Linnell with Oregon Thoroughbred. Actually, if you could go to Dr. Lombard, because my comment pertains to section 1 of this, so I'd rather have the discussion on section 2 finish first.
Okay, that sounds fair. Dr.
Thank you.
Lombard, go ahead.
I apologize. I'm only calling in because the internet's not working well here. So my
No
comment
problem.
is To Rod's point, the only information that I have is from back when Dr. Cattler was keeping good data. And there were no horses that broke down during that period of time that ran back. The closest one that ran back that did break down ran 12 days prior to a race. And there were a lot of horses that did run back to back, 3 days, 2 days, even day to day. And none of those broke down. So I very much encourage the idea of not letting horses run constantly. And so the 10-day part of this, I very much support, but the 72 hours or 3 days thing, I'm not sure is going to fix the problem.
Okay. Director Nguyen.
Just for the record, we did have a horse last summer that ran 2 days in a row and had run the week before that and broke down. And that doesn't mean that every horse that runs back to back breaks down. But it's just like a person. You wouldn't want a person to do a marathon 2 days in a row. And again, I'm not a veterinarian.
Well, and I feel like having better veterinary supervision on race days and pre-checks is going to make a big difference as well.
And finally, I would add to that the way I envision this, and maybe I need to reword it so it's better understood. I'm thinking 72 hours. So if you raced on Friday and you could race again on Monday. So if there was a 4-day, you could still do 2 days. There would just be 2 rest days in between. And I think that's a better way to word it.
Yeah, I think the wording needs some cleaning up, but I think you're right. I think that's good.
Other comments? My screen is really kind of jumbled, so I'm struggling. If someone's got their hand up and I don't see it, I apologize. If you could speak up. Okay, seeing none, then I'll go back to you, Linnell.
Thank you. Yes, the only comment I have, and it's just because we're reviewing this rule now, is in section 1, it's pertaining to the Oregon bred races. So per statute, an Oregon bred race is required to be written every day, and we understand that they don't always fill. Our board is currently looking at having Oregon bred preferred races. We're having a discussion on it. It hasn't been approved yet, but we are considering it. We understand there's a lot of changes then that happens as far as who's keeping track of that. Is it the racing secretary and the track bookkeeper, or if it comes through our association? We'll figure all that out. But I just wanted to let you be aware of that. And one of my items of concern would be in section 1, it does say if there are not enough available horses of that class on any day, the race may be replaced with the approval of the stewards. So I just want to make sure everyone's clear that if we do this and we say the Oregon bred race didn't fill, we're going to make it Oregon bred preferred, that does have to go through an approval process with the stewards, and how all that would work. If it's just this racing secretary that does that, or if it's our association that needs to do something, just so we're all following what we need to do. It doesn't have to be decided today. It's just something that I wanted to bring up so that everybody is aware what could be happening. And that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Anybody else? Yes.
I
Go
would
ahead,
just ask
Commissioner
him, since our presiding steward is on, how he thinks that would work.
Good question.
It doesn't seem
Very,
like it would be an
very
issue.
easily, because we already do something similar to that anyway. The racing secretary will write an extra and call it Oregon bred preferred. You know, it could be a late extra to replace the Oregon bred that didn't go. And that's fairly common practice. So I don't see an issue with it at all.
Okay. Anyone else?
So I guess I just got a question, clarification. So this year, since the 4th of July is on a Friday and we're gonna run the next day, Saturday, as far as the Sora meet goes. Now, if they ran the last day at Sora, could they then still run twice in Prineville, which starts only, what, 3 days, Rod, 4 days later? And so is that gonna become an issue?
Well, they run on Wednesday, we end on Saturday, so that is 3 days, there's 3 days in between there.
The point is they can't run 3 times in 10 days.
They can't run 3 times in 10 days. That's a problem.
I think not running 3
Yeah.
times in 10 days is appropriate, is Dr. Lombard.
I agree.
And who was that other one that agreed? I'm sorry.
Fraternity.
I agree
No,
that
they
this is
run
Dr.
that on
Lombard.
Sunday.
And was that Dr. Manhart? I'm sorry.
I heard Dr. Lombard and then I heard a second person that agreed. And who was that?
Me.
It sounded
Go
like
ahead,
Dr.
Commissioner Stein.
Lombard, but I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
Chairwoman, this is Dr. Stein. In looking at the calendar, I do see why there would be a concern on the 10-day issue that a horse that could race on the 5th closing day at Grants Pass, come back July 9th, that fits the 3 days. But then the 12th, which is again 3 days later, which fits the 72 hours, could then not be able to run on the 12th because of the 10 days. So I do have, as much as I agree with the idea of not racing 3 times in 10 days, we have that issue for Prineville. And I'd actually, do we have the race secretary at this committee meeting? Because I think that's my concern, that, how the races are written really are going to determine how we have this spread out. There are limited opportunities. I recognize the horse population, but the race secretary has got to kind of jumble
Problem at time.
these dates.
Mhm.
But that, I do see a concern there. I think we have to actually rectify that. I see that as the only quirk in the schedule that 10 days could have an effect. So I think we need to examine that with the race secretary to know exactly how that affects his planning for the races.
I will say, oh, sorry.
Leah, go ahead.
No, well, let Connie go. She had a thought. Let Connie go.
I didn't raise my hand
Okay.
though, so please.
I just say we'll potentially have more problems than.
Am I supposed to go or is Connie going?
You're going, I'll shut
You
up.
can go ahead.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say that I think, and I'm just very quickly looking at this. I think we could possibly have the same problem for quarter horses at Prineville, because we have a futurity over there, which usually runs on Friday night. And we would, so any of the horses that ran in the Firecracker on the 4th would have a problem, I guess, if it's the 10-day issue. And so, I'm not sure exactly how it would all work out, but we could potentially have that problem too.
It's gonna roll around every 6 years or so.
Okay.
So that's just 2 races in 10 days though. You can have 2 races in 10 days. It's just not 3 races in 10 days.
That takes them out of a.
Okay, well, maybe that.
So it sounds to me like what we want to do is bring this back up at the full commission meeting and maybe see if we can get Jerry on here. It seems to me like we were adding races at Prineville last year because we had extra horses. So I'm not sure how this is going to really hurt
You
us.
were,
No, that's,
you were adding extra.
I think, Connie, that may have only been maybe Friday or Saturday night. I think they run 10 races on Saturday night.
Any other issues anyone wants to bring up on this topic?
My only other added comment, this is Dr. Lombard, is if we're making rule changes, we're looking at this year, right? We're all looking at our calendars, but how does this affect us moving forward? Because the calendar changes every year.
Normally it wouldn't. This is an exception, I think, this year.
Well, we'll run, I would think, and this is up to Rod, obviously, but I would think so we're running the same amount of days next year, because next year, 4th of July is just gonna move to Saturday from Friday. So we'd probably run. So, I mean, but you're right. Once it gets to be the 4th of July back to Monday, then Dave's right. We won't face this again for years. So.
Other comments? Leah, did you want to respond again?
No, I mean, I agree. It could change because the calendar changes. So, and I think this short time in between may only be once every 5 or 6 years. Between Prineville and Grants Pass.
Dr. Stein?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of reiterate that I think when the race secretary has a condition book out and horsemen know whatever the rule might be, I think they can then have their schedules in such a way that it makes sense to them. Whereas, we're kind of a little bit in the abstract. We do have the paper, the proposed schedule. But again, without the race secretary and knowing how this all plays out over the course of the summer, we clearly need his input. But I think ultimately the horsemen will look at a schedule and say, okay, I can run this day, that day, the next day. Obviously, if the race doesn't fill and they have to, call an audible and figure out, that happens all the time. But I do think with a set schedule, with the race secretary having the input, I think we'll really come to a good decision here.
I think that makes some sense to have another discussion on this topic when we've got the race secretary online. I saw a number, or maybe one, but other people have joined this meeting, it looked like. Is there anybody else that wants to comment on this topic? Hearing no one, I think that's it, unless, yes, go ahead.
I just want to make sure I'm clear from my direction. Do you want to bring this up in another committee meeting, or do you want to bring it up to the full commission? Do you want me to try to get the racing secretary in for a separate committee meeting?
Yeah. 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 I would say
Rod?
yes.
It's up to you.
Okay.
You're the chair.
Connie, I would suggest bringing this up in a fair meeting. This is affecting the fairs more than anybody. And I think there should be a fair meeting, and I think that the racing secretary should be involved in the commission meeting as well as the fair meeting and really hash this thing out. Because like at Grants Pass, if they run every weekend at Grants Pass, they run there 3 days, then they can't run at Prineville at all.
No, they could run it.
If you run You can't run more than 3 races in 10 days.
So if they ran 2 races at Grants Pass,
If they ran 3 races at Grants Pass,
well,
every
if they
week.
ran 3 races in Grants Pass, then you'd have enough time between the last ones. You wouldn't run 3 days in a row.
You run 3
you
weekends in
would.
a row. You run 3 weekends in a row, you can't run at Prineville at all because you'd already ran 3 times within that 10
There's
days,
not
right?
10 days.
But one of those weeks would
right.
fall off when the next week came.
Huh? Huh?
So perhaps there needs to be a little more clarity then in how it's going to be counted. I'm not
I
sure
agree,
I'm following, Connie.
Yeah, I'm
So
not following very well.
Uh,
Sorry.
Chairwoman,
go ahead, Dr. Stein.
yeah, at Grants Pass really isn't the issue. It's basically every 7 days you race. You could race 4 times at Grants Pass, and then you could still race at Prineville because you're talking 7 days, and you shouldn't get hung up on the 3 races
Oh.
because you're talking a 7-day at Grants Pass. So even if you race the last 2 weekends at Grants Pass, those are 2 races, and then you go to Prineville and you've got somewhere between the 9th and the 12th to race again. And that's your 10 days, 3 races. It's not an issue. At least that's how I read it.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I think-
Who is this asking?
Dr. Lombard.
Oh, okay, sure.
So I'd like to circle back to what the intent of what we're all doing here right now is, and that's to reduce injury and reduce catastrophic injuries. And I think we all have the same idea that that's what we need to be working on. And let's look at the data and the facts and the ways that our catastrophic injuries have happened in our state and also in other states. And I think our not racing 3 times in 10 days is a very reasonable thing. But looking at the data in our state, honestly, running back to back at Union or Prineville has not been an issue. Other than one case, there is one catastrophic injury that was a big issue and it resulted in a catastrophic injury. We don't have a training facility. We don't have Portland Meadows anymore. Horses are working because they have to work to run. And though they're not on paper races, they're running at speeds. And I think we need to address that as well. So that's maybe an issue for a different day or not, but I think that's another thing that could
I think
definitely
there needs
help
to
us.
be a lot more evaluations.
Yes.
Chris Montesino, I see your hand up, and then one other whose name I don't see.
Rod's actually before me. He could go.
No, I'm
Okay,
done.
go ahead, Rod.
I don't know how you get this off of here, but I'm done.
Oh, just hit the raise the
Okay.
hand button again.
Okay.
Yeah, so I noticed that I'm not sure if this is restricted to just organ racing or if we're gonna count races outside our jurisdiction. So someone racing at Emerald Downs they've raced 2 races in 4 days, and then they come immediately down to Grants Pass and race within that 10-day window. I know it's going to be the race secretary to figure that out, but I mean, there's mistakes, and people are human. They make mistakes, and I know jurisdiction. I mean, I know it's going to fall on the horsemen in the end, but I wanted to make sure that if this rule is it strictly organ based, or should we add some type of verbiage in there saying also restricted to outside jurisdictions? Because I don't see anything that says, it just says, I'm just looking at the rule. It doesn't mention anything outside our jurisdiction is applied to this rule. So just like
Other-
probably adding that in there to making sure that,
The way that I look at it, it doesn't limit it to Oregon races either. So I think it's a straight 3 days, 10 days, wherever anyone has, that's my reading, but I hear your point that perhaps there needs to be some clarification there.
yeah, it's just because, you know, people are going to look for caveats from rule. I didn't break the rule because you don't say strictly Oregon. You don't say
Yeah.
strictly Racy or whatever. There's always going to be someone looking to look for that loophole. And I'm just trying to close up that loophole.
Dr. Stein?
Yeah, this applies to horses. I don't think it applies to schedules. If someone's racing from I don't know when Turf Paradise's schedule ends or whatever, but Emerald Downs for sure, or other places. I mean, we're talking horses, and what we really don't want is for someone to have some horse coming from another jurisdiction that may be questionable and then come and try to race at the fairs and, you know, break down and make Oregon look terrible, even though it probably was beginning to unravel at another jurisdiction. Another point, and Rod probably can answer this. One of my concerns is that we have horses that have raced. You don't have if they come back too soon, you won't have the past performances for those horses in a racing program. Which I find always disturbing, that, you know, if you want to encourage any wagering, the worst thing you can have, I find, is that in the program it says line to be announced. And that's always a little disconcerting for someone who actually wants to wager on the races. So I'd like Rod's or Randy's, feeling on that.
Well, we have a charter that charts all the races the day of the races. And so they are automatically right away in Equibase. And so even if you run the next day, those statistics are in the program. So like at Prineville, if a horse runs every single day, the past performance is in for the day before. That, as far as I'm aware of, we've never had that issue.
Dr. Lombard?
In my experience doing pre-race exams the next morning, if I don't know exactly what horses are running and go through the entire program and entries line by line, every horse I go through, and I make sure I know who's run the day before or the 2 days before, even, because it's not in the forms that I get. So it's really, the onus is on the people doing the boots on the ground work. And we have to make sure that we know, okay, this horse did really run yesterday, last night at midnight, and now I'm doing a pre-race exam on it at 9 a.m. So there's a lot more to it. It's not as straightforward as printing off a form.
So is there a way that it could be changed where the horse owners are adding more to your form, Dr. Lombard, so that was more clear?
I don't know how. I mean, I don't want to put it on the racing secretary. It's not their job. The horse did run. It's in a system somewhere, but we don't get the print offs. We don't get that information at 9 a.m.
Gotcha.
Well,
And so if you're not going through it all, and so that's the other thing about the way this rule is proposed to be written is 72 hours. It's like, well, we put the onus in the rule writing on the horsemen, but who's really overseeing that? Where does that information come from?
Yeah. Then there needs to be a way to oversee it.
Right.
Dr. Stein, were you going to add something?
Well, no, I was just the idea. That's really the entry system. And initially, when I was communicating with Connie about this, I know in the certain harness tracks that I've raced at, the rule was no in-to-go horses can be entered. And that was for several reasons, but one of them has to do with the race lines, is that you get into this situation where you don't know the horse is raced. You might have the date when it raced, but you don't know how it raced. And for the better, that's just not acceptable. But I don't see, I mean, it's in the system. When you enter, it's going to know that you've entered. If you've raced, it's going to have at least the date when you entered. But I can't imagine the programs being printed up that quickly. We used to have issues with when programs went out, the companies and various other things. So if a horse raced on a Saturday and you wanted to race him back on a Sunday, those not only are those 9 lines not in there, but the program was probably printed on Saturday from the overnights and the PPs from the day or 2 days before. So that was my concern on that issue.
Yeah, and when I go to pull PPs on horses that I do morning of, which I, for the record, pay for myself and do myself, when I go to do pre-race exams at the fair meets, I get what I get, and sometimes it's 48 hours behind, and I have to go back through, and I go through every horse to see who's run before, who ran at that meet before, because I want to know, but it's not easy. It's not there.
Interesting. Okay. I think I saw Karen Parkman, your hand up.
And I should put my hand up.
So at risk of sounding stupid here, but I'm trying to make sure that I've got it clear. So the programs, don't the test barn technicians still keep the copies of the programs from each day of racing, so that information of the horses that ran the day before they have in their possession, so that the vets on the next morning getting the new program have the new horse list, but they would also have the list from the previous days? Yes, no?
That's we have to go through all those line by line, every single horse, to see who's run that weekend. It's not a quick printout to say, like, normally I would love, and when I worked at Portland, like, it was great. Like, we had the list and the PPs would come through, you'd see who had run when, and it was updated, right? So you could see, oh, this horse ran on July 17th. It's now July 19th. You know that horse had run, but the PPs are not updated fast enough. So if you don't go through every single horse every single day, all 100 or whatever horses, you don't know that information is not readily available unless you line item go through it all.
Gotcha. Connie, did you want to add something?
Yes, and I promise I'll shut up after this one. The only other thing I wanted to say is, if we make a rule and somebody breaks it and we accidentally approve them to go through, they've still broken the rule by entering the horse. The onus is on the person who has a horse that enters them. Isn't that correct, Mike? Wouldn't you assume that's correct?
I do. I agree.
I mean, we would still want to do our best to review that. And one of the things I am doing is getting additional test barn help. Hopefully I'll have a vet. But the extra test barn help could potentially also help in that process.
Great. Okay, any other comments on this topic?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, who is this?
Yes, this is Tag Waterspoon calling from Grants Pass Downs. I'm just on my phone, so I can't raise my hand. I tried to get a hold of Connie, but I just wanted to help you guys out with the program thing a little bit, knowing what I know and working with Josie Stavers and working with Jerry in the racing office, that, as far as Grants Pass Downs is concerned, is that, typically our program, say we're talking about a weekend racing schedule, Saturday, Sunday, our programs for Saturday are printed on Thursday. And then our programs for Sunday are printed on Friday. But, you know, in this day and age, we don't have anybody running back to back as far as on Saturday and Sunday. So you don't have to worry about the past performances. I do know that with Prineville and with Tillamook, and I even think with Union, because they print their programs the day they run, and I can understand where some of you people are coming from when you're talking about overnights and referring to overnights. But I do know, as someone that looks at the past performances, that with, say, Prineville, that if a horse is running back-to-back days, because the program is not being printed until the day the horse actually runs that second time. So say if a horse runs on Thursday and then happens to come back and run on Friday, the past performance lines from Thursday night are going to be in the Friday program for that horse, because that program is not printed until like Friday afternoon, which gives Josie or whoever's doing the chart, Steve Reed, time to get all that information in the system. And it's the same way up in Tillamook. So it's, you know, the programs oftentimes are printed at some of the fair meets with Union and Prineville and Tillamook. They're printed the day of the races. So any information as far as that horse running earlier in the meet, those PPs are going to be in the program. So I just wanted to kind of help you guys out there, because I know, you know, I'm very familiar with that. So as far as, you know, maybe handicappers or bettors maybe being at a disadvantage because that information is not in the program, just based on the timing of when the programs are actually printed, that information is actually in the program.
Yeah, thanks, Tag. It's just they're not in there in the morning for the vets.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right. That's why you've got to do that extra legwork as far as figuring out, okay, hey, did this horse actually run last night? Or, you know, but as far as the afternoon, when those programs are being sold, you know, that information is included in the program.
And I have just a brief comment, Connie, back to what you were saying that the onus is on the horseman here. I think this rule makes that 100% clear in the sub C compliance part, that the onus is absolutely on the trainers and the owners to make sure that this rule is being followed, not on the vets or any of the other employees of the racetrack. Anything else? Perfect. Then I believe that's our only business to discuss here. So I just need a motion to adjourn. I think that's got to come from you, Dr. Stein.
Move we adjourn.
Okay, I'll second that.
Do we need a vote?
Okay, so
We don't have
So
a quorum,
then
so no need to vote.
okay, so then I can officially call us adjourned.
Yeah.
All right. Oh,
Connie, are you still
last
there?
time.
Okay, that's fine. I'll
Okay.
email her.
All right, I'll do the same. There was one other thing I wanted to point out, but okay, then we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Have a good day.
Thanks, guys.